Dr. Emily Richardson hurried through the bustling terminal at Chicago O'Hare International, her carry-on suitcase rolling behind her. Beads of sweat dotted her forehead as she checked her watch. Only 15 minutes left before boarding closed for her connecting flight to San Francisco. 15 minutes to navigate what felt like miles of gleaming terminal. All while her knee throbbed from an old injury that was aggravated by the dry, cold Chicago air. She winced and adjusted her pace to avoid putting too much weight on it. At 58, Emily was still in great shape thanks to her regular swimming at the university pool. But after 3 back-to-back lectures, and a delayed first flight, her energy reserves were running low. The constant hum of announcements, the clatter of luggage, and the chatter of travelers from all over the world filled the air. To Emily, airports were always fascinating places where people from all walks of life converged temporarily before dispersing across the globe. As a sociology professor specializing in institutional racism, she found herself constantly observing how people interacted differently depending on who they were speaking to. She checked her watch again, only 10 minutes to go. She could make it, but barely. The thought of missing her flight sent a wave of anxiety through her. Tomorrow was her son, Jonathan's first day as captain on this route, and she promised she would be there to support him. She had raised Jonathan as a single mother while managing her academic career, and this milestone was something she wouldn't miss for the world. As she approached Gate 42, she saw the crowded gate area and allowed herself a small sigh of relief. She wasn't too late. She slowed her pace to give her knee a brief reprieve and fished out her boarding pass and ID. The first boarding group was already lining up. Priority passengers and those needing special assistance. Emily belonged to the latter category today. Her knee was giving her trouble and standing in line for 20 minutes was unbearable. She'd never used her physical limitations for advantage, but today she was willing to make an exception. Approaching the priority line, Emily was greeted by a young flight attendant with neatly styled brown hair in a crisp navy uniform. Her name tag read Lena Martin. Emily explained her situation, asking if it would be possible to board earlier due to her knee pain. Lena glanced up, assessing Emily briefly before offering a polite smile. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but we're currently boarding priority passengers and those with documented disabilities," Lena replied, her tone polite but firm. Emily shifted her weight. "I understand, but my knee is really bothering me today. I can't stand for long periods. Would it be possible to board earlier? My knee flares up sometimes." Lena's smile remained fixed, but her tone grew more rehearsed. "Unfortunately, you'll need to wait for your boarding group. We have to maintain the boarding process to ensure an efficient departure." Emily nodded, feeling the sting of the rejection. As she stepped aside, she noticed an older white couple approaching. The man, perhaps in his early 60s, leaned in toward Lena with a friendly conspiratorial tone. "Excuse me, we're in Group 3, but my wife's back is bothering her. Would it be all right if we join the priority line?" Lena's demeanor shifted immediately. "Of course, sir. Not a problem at all," she said, her smile broadening as she waved them ahead. The couple passed by, the woman walking without any visible discomfort, and Emily stood frozen for a moment. The contrast in treatment was striking. And though she had encountered such microaggressions before, they never failed to hurt. She considered confronting Lena, but quickly dismissed the idea. Experience had taught her when to pick her battles. Not today, she thought. Instead, she stepped back and waited for her group to be called, observing the passengers around her and noting how Lena's attitude shifted depending on the person. It was a pattern Emily had seen before, one that would make for an excellent case study on unconscious bias. Finally, when her group was called, Emily boarded the plane with a grimace, her knee throbbing. She found her seat 14A, a window seat in premium economy she had splurged on for the extra leg room. As she settled in, she thought of Jonathan, wondering if he had faced similar biases in his aviation career. A black man in a predominantly white field, Jonathan had always been optimistic that excellence would prevail over prejudice. Tomorrow would be the moment she had been waiting for. Emily settled into her seat and took a deep breath, trying to relax as the plane began to fill up around her. She checked her watch again, only about 10 minutes before the boarding process would be over. As the final passengers trickled in, she watched the flight attendants perform their duties, ensuring everything was in order. Among them was Lena, the same young flight attendant she had encountered at the gate. The moment their eyes met, Emily sensed the slight discomfort in Lena's posture, the subtle shift in her gaze. It wasn't much, just a fleeting moment, but Emily couldn't help but notice. She had seen this before. That slight avoidance, that change in energy when someone who had previously shown no warmth or kindness saw you again. This time recognizing who you were. The realization made Emily uneasy, but she dismissed it for now. It was a long flight, and she had enough to occupy her mind. As the plane began its taxi toward the runway, Emily's thoughts wandered to her son, Jonathan. He had always been her pride. From the young boy building paper airplanes in their tiny apartment in Chicago to the man who now commanded a real one. She smiled to herself, proud of his resilience and determination. She wondered if he had ever encountered the kind of microaggression she had faced, whether in his flight training or now as one of the few black captains in the airline industry. The thought of him brought her joy, but it also reminded her of the challenges he had likely faced as a black man in a profession still largely dominated by white men. She had always raised Jonathan to be aware of the challenges ahead of him, to be prepared for bias, but to keep moving forward regardless. She'd taught him to excel despite the obstacles, to let his work speak for itself, and he had. But even with that foundation, Emily knew that things would not always be easy for him. The plane lifted off and the hum of the engines enveloped her. But her peace was short-lived. Just as the seatbelt sign was turned off and passengers settled into the flight, Emily noticed something she hadn't expected. Lena, the flight attendant, approached her row. Emily looked up, bracing herself for another awkward interaction. The last thing she wanted was to relive the tension from the gate. But as Lena stopped at her seat, Emily was taken aback by the change in her demeanor. Instead of the distant, almost dismissive politeness from earlier, Lena offered a warm, genuine smile. "Good morning, ma'am. How are you feeling now? Is your knee doing better?" Lena asked. Emily blinked momentarily, taken off guard. It was a polite question, but the shift in tone caught her by surprise. She had expected the same professional detachment, but here was an employee who seemed to truly care. Emily couldn't help but wonder, was this Lena trying to make amends for their earlier interaction? Or was this just part of the flight attendant's routine to check on passengers in a more personal way? "I'm doing better, thank you," Emily replied cautiously. "The rest has helped a lot." Lena nodded, and for a brief moment, their eyes met. No longer the brief dismissive glance from earlier, but something different. Perhaps a touch of empathy. As Lena moved on to the next row, Emily reflected on the interaction. It was subtle, but Emily recognized the effort. Maybe Lena was trying to make up for her earlier behavior. Emily, however, wasn't sure how to feel about it. The flight had barely begun, but already there were changes in the air, small, unspoken shifts that spoke volumes. Emily had spent her career studying these subtle shifts, these microaggressions, these moments when biases were so ingrained in people's actions that they hardly even noticed them. She had observed countless such moments in her own life. And though they were painful, she had learned to let them go without confrontation. It was the quiet toll of navigating a world where your worth was often questioned and rarely taken at face value. But as she sat there watching Lena disappear down the aisle, Emily couldn't help but wonder if things were slowly beginning to change. Not just in society, but within the people who carried these biases. Maybe change was coming one small step at a time. As the plane climbed higher into the sky, Emily leaned back in her seat, looking out the window at the vast expanse of clouds below. The rhythmic hum of the engines provided a comforting backdrop to her thoughts, and she allowed herself a rare moment of quiet reflection. She had been on so many flights, but this one felt different. Tomorrow, she would finally witness Jonathan's first day as captain. A proud mother, she couldn't wait to see her son in action, leading a crew and commanding an aircraft. She thought about all the sacrifices she had made to get to this point. Long nights of grading papers while Jonathan slept. The endless juggling of her academic career with motherhood. Raising him as a single parent had been difficult, but she had done it with love and dedication. And now Jonathan was a captain, an accomplished man in a field that was still predominantly white. She was proud of him, and her heart swelled with anticipation for what tomorrow would bring. As the flight continued, Emily's thoughts shifted back to the plane's crew. She had seen Lena moving through the cabin earlier, but now she glanced toward the front where the captain's seat was located. Something in the air felt familiar, yet she couldn't place it. It was a slight, almost imperceptible shift in the way the cabin felt. The flight attendants had announced the usual updates over the intercom, and everything seemed routine, but a small part of Emily remained alert. Suddenly, the captain's voice came over the intercom. Emily sat up a little straighter, recognizing something familiar in the cadence of the announcement. It was a voice she knew well, though she hadn't expected to hear it today. She listened more intently as the captain continued to speak. "We're currently cruising at 38,000 feet, just passing over the eastern edge of Colorado with an expected arrival time in San Francisco of 8:45 a.m. local time," the captain said. The voice was calm and professional with a slight lilt to it that Emily recognized immediately. Her breath caught in her chest as the realization hit her. This was Jonathan's voice. He was the captain on this flight. It took a moment for her to process what had just happened, but when she did, a surge of pride rushed through her. Her son, the boy who had always dreamed of flying, was now commanding this very plane, and she hadn't even known he was flying this route. Tears pricked at the corners of Emily's eyes, and she quickly wiped them away, not wanting to draw attention to herself. It was the most thoughtful surprise, the kind of gesture Jonathan would have planned months in advance, knowing how much this moment would mean to her. He had orchestrated this entire experience, arranging to be the captain on her flight without telling her. Emily smiled, overcome with emotion. She had raised Jonathan as a single mother. And now, as she sat in this seat watching him guide a plane through the sky, she could hardly believe how far they had come. He had worked tirelessly to make this dream a reality. And now he was at the helm of an aircraft, making history as one of the few black captains in aviation. Emily's heart swelled with love and pride. The intercom crackled again, and the captain's voice continued, this time with a slight chuckle. "For those aviation enthusiasts aboard, we're flying over beautiful clear skies all the way to San Francisco. And for those of you planning to explore the city today, the temperature is currently 62 degrees Fahrenheit with light winds." Jonathan's voice was confident and composed, but Emily could hear the excitement underlying his words. She leaned back in her seat, allowing herself to absorb the moment. There was no mistaking it. This was Jonathan's surprise to her. The boy who once built paper airplanes in their small Chicago apartment had become the man who now commanded real ones. Emily felt a lump in her throat as she realized just how proud she was of him. It wasn't just the milestone of becoming captain that moved her. It was the journey that had led them here. The sacrifices, the struggles, and the dreams. Emily had done everything in her power to support Jonathan. And now seeing him succeed in this way was the reward she had long awaited. The flight continued smoothly, and as the hours passed, Emily felt herself drifting into a quiet reflection. She thought about the changes in Lena's behavior. It wasn't something huge, just small, subtle differences, but they were enough to make Emily wonder. She had always been aware of how people, particularly in service roles, treated passengers based on assumptions. Her experience, both personally and academically, had taught her that even the smallest moments of kindness or disregard spoke volumes. As the flight began its descent toward San Francisco, Emily felt a slight shift in the cabin atmosphere. Her eyes caught Lena moving through the aisle, checking seatbelts and making sure everyone was settled for landing. Emily watched her approach, not sure if she was just being sensitive to her own feelings or if there was something more to this encounter. She had no desire for confrontation, but part of her was still aware of the tension that had existed between them earlier. When Lena finally reached Emily's row, their eyes met. And this time, something was different. Lena didn't just ask if Emily needed anything or offer a quick smile. There was a hesitation in her movements, as if she were about to say something more. "Dr. Richardson," Lena began, her voice quieter than before. "I wanted to apologize for my behavior earlier at the gate and again when we first boarded. It wasn't right and I should have treated you better. I've been thinking about it and I feel awful." Emily blinked, surprised by the sincerity in Lena's tone. She had expected the flight attendants to keep things strictly professional, but this was different. There was something in Lena's voice, a real effort to confront her actions and make amends. "You didn't deserve to be treated that way," Lena continued, her gaze dropping slightly. "I gave you a hard time when you asked for special assistance. But I let some unconscious bias get in the way, and I should have known better." She paused for a moment, gathering her thoughts. "I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry. I know I can do better." Emily was quiet for a moment, processing what Lena had said. She could sense the young woman's discomfort, her vulnerability as she faced the reality of her actions. This wasn't just a superficial apology. It was a recognition of something deeper, something that needed to be addressed. "I appreciate your honesty, Lena," Emily said softly. "We all make mistakes, and the important thing is that we learn from them. It's not easy to recognize those blind spots in ourselves, but the fact that you're doing that speaks volumes. It's a step toward change." Lena's shoulders relaxed slightly and she looked up at Emily, a small but genuine smile forming. "Thank you for being understanding. I've been trying to educate myself more. You know, reading up on things I might not fully understand. It's a process, but I want to keep growing." Emily nodded. "That's the key. Growth. It's not always a smooth or easy path, but it's the right one, and it's something we all have to work on day by day." There was a long pause before Lena spoke again, her voice more thoughtful now. "I just wish I had done better in the moment. I didn't realize it at the time, but it really bothered me how I treated you. I guess it's harder to see our own biases when they're so ingrained." Emily smiled softly. "It takes courage to acknowledge it and even more courage to change. So, keep going, Lena. You're on the right path." Lena nodded, visibly relieved. And then, after a brief moment of silence, she moved on to assist another passenger, her posture more open than before. Emily watched her go, feeling a strange sense of peace. This wasn't the grand confrontation she had sometimes envisioned, but it was enough. In the quiet moments of this flight, two people had begun to understand each other a little better. As the plane began its final descent into San Francisco, Emily allowed herself to savor the moment. She wasn't just proud of Jonathan for becoming a captain. She was proud of the quiet progress that could be made, even in small everyday interactions. Change wasn't always grand or immediate. But sometimes it was the small steps, the quiet realizations that made the biggest difference. The plane descended smoothly into San Francisco, the city coming into view through the small oval window beside Emily's seat. The iconic skyline with the Golden Gate Bridge standing tall in the distance was a sight she had seen countless times. But today, it felt different. Today, everything felt like it was coming full circle. As the aircraft taxied toward the gate, Emily couldn't help but think about how much had changed, not just in her life, but in the lives of those around her. Jonathan's rise through the aviation ranks was a testament to resilience in the face of adversity, to overcoming obstacles that seemed insurmountable. But more than that, it was a story of persistence and hope. A hope that things could get better, that small changes could build up to something bigger. When the plane finally came to a stop and the seatbelt sign turned off, passengers began to gather their belongings, readying themselves to disembark. Emily took her time, waiting until most passengers had left the cabin. She wanted to savor this moment, her first moments in San Francisco after her son had surprised her with this unforgettable experience. As she gathered her things, she glanced around the cabin. Lena was moving through the aisle again, assisting passengers as they prepared to leave. This time, there was no hesitation in her demeanor. She wasn't the same flight attendant Emily had encountered at the gate, or even on the earlier leg of the flight. Lena's professionalism was more sincere now, her interactions with passengers genuine and attentive. Emily made her way toward the front of the plane, noting how Lena's interactions with other passengers seemed more open and warm without the previous formality that had marked her earlier interactions. She approached the cockpit door and gave a small nod to Derek, one of the other flight attendants, who smiled knowingly at her as she passed. "Dr. Richardson." "Good to see you," Derek said warmly. "Captain's expecting you." Emily smiled and nodded, her heart swelling with pride. As she stood in the doorway of the cockpit, she saw Jonathan dressed in his crisp captain's uniform, for golden stripes gleaming on his shoulders. The sight of him standing there in command was almost too much for Emily to process. Jonathan looked up from his paperwork and his face immediately broke into a wide grin. "Mom," he exclaimed, standing up and enveloping her in a tight embrace. "What are you doing here?" Emily's eyes filled with tears, and she hugged him back just as tightly. "You didn't tell me you were flying today," she said, her voice thick with emotion. Jonathan chuckled softly. "Where would the fun be in that?" he teased. "I wanted to surprise you." "This is the best surprise," Emily said, pulling back slightly to look at him. She reached up to adjust his tie in a gesture she hadn't made since he was a teenager. "I am so incredibly proud of you, Jonathan. Not just for becoming captain, but for the man you've become." Jonathan's smile softened and he placed a hand on her shoulder. "Everything I am, I owe to you, Mom. Every sacrifice, every late night you spent helping me study. Every time you told me to keep pushing forward, it all led to this moment." Just then, Lena entered the cockpit, holding a tablet and hesitating when she saw Emily and Jonathan together. There was a brief moment of awkwardness before Lena cleared her throat. "Captain, I just need your signature on the cabin report," she said, her voice slightly unsteady. Jonathan took the tablet from her and signed it, his eyes meeting Emily's with a flicker of recognition. "Lena, this is my mom, Dr. Emily Richardson. Mom, this is Lena Martin, one of our flight attendants." Emily extended her hand with a warm smile. "It's nice to meet you, Lena. Thank you for the great service today." Lena looked a little flustered, but she returned the handshake. "Nice to meet you, too, Dr. Richardson. And I'm really sorry again about earlier," she added, her voice quieter. Emily could sense the sincerity in Lena's apology, and she gave her a reassuring smile. "Thank you for that, Lena. It's not always easy to recognize our own biases, but the important thing is that you're taking the steps to learn and grow. That means a lot." Lena nodded, visibly relieved before excusing herself to finish her duties. Emily watched her leave, reflecting on the unexpected turn of events during the flight, the quiet conversations, the personal growth, and the chance to witness small moments of change. Jonathan turned to his mother, his face breaking into a proud grin. "I'm glad you're here, Mom. This has been a day I'll never forget." Emily smiled, her heart full. She had watched Jonathan grow into a remarkable man. And now, watching him stand as captain in the cockpit, she knew that change was possible. Not just in one person, but in the world. She had lived through enough moments of disappointment. But today was about progress, no matter how small. It was about hope, understanding, and the quiet, persistent work of breaking down barriers. As Emily stepped out of the cockpit, she knew she would carry this moment with her for the rest of her life. It wasn't just about one flight, one milestone. It was about a journey, one that was far from over, but one that had taken them all further than they had ever imagined.